The agenda this week teamed up with WGSI, the Waterloo Global Science Initiative, to examine how well Canada and the world are doing on the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals that seek to address poverty, climate change, inadequate housing, and more. The agenda's Week in Review begins with what cities can do.
Agenda 21, it was only national government leaders that were in the forum in Rio.
So you were all excluded?
Yes, and we were, I personally remember pushing. We had Maurice Strong, was then head of the United Nations Environment and Development Group. And we were pushing Canadian mayors to be able to be on the podium in Rio because we were already, looking at an urban world, that threshold of rural to urban development. There was one mayor in the opening plenary. It was the mayor of Rio de Janeiro. Why? Because he was welcoming the national level delegates to Rio.
And that's all they saw his role as, right? Just the welcoming guy.
Welcoming.
Well, there's been a transformation in the role of the cities and municipalities, which is stark in Ontario, and that transformation has gone from being a dumping ground for downloading from the province and the national level, where they shift tax burdens off of income and sales taxes onto property tax. And we've spent the last 17 years or so trying to reverse that with a great deal of success from in the Ontario context because of the uploading that this provincial government agreed to do about 8 years ago. So, I mean, I think of cities as a kind of revolutionary act in the Canadian context. We have a constitution that only recognizes the national and the provincial levels, and the provinces are no subordinate entity to the national level, as the Supreme Court decision on trade between provinces proves. And we are kept out, we're not wanted. One of the favorite little stories I have about Confederation is in the 30 years, in the decades leading up to Confederation, a group of farmers in a rural area down east organized to build a schoolhouse and hire a teacher, and they were shut down by the Crown, and the response from the Crown was, when we want you to have a school, we'll let you know.
Because municipalities are creations of the province. You don't have that legitimacy, I guess, in the eyes of the Constitution.
So you had all these settlers going, well, that's great, you can have all the authority you want, but when are you going to act? When are you going to live up to your responsibilities?
Well, Mayor Verbanovich, let me ask you this. To what extent, you get elected by the people of Kitchener. You don't get elected around the world. So I wonder whether SDGs, these Sustainable Development Goal number 11, which is what we're talking about tonight, how much that really guides your approach to trying to build a better Kitchener?
You know what, I would say it certainly gives us a global context within which we're working together with other municipalities and communities around the planet to tackle these things. And I think, as my colleague Mayor Burton said earlier, we're all dealing with these issues. I mean, Kitchener's had a sustainability plan for some time. Waterloo Region has been building an LRT as part of effective transportation. We've worked with the national government to see the national housing strategy that got announced earlier this year, and we're ready to implement those dollars as they start flowing. So I would say the work that we're doing in Canada, we've been doing over some time. We have, right now in Ottawa and in Toronto, governments that recognize the importance of this agenda and moving it forward. And we now have a global context within which we're working, within which Canada is proud to be part of.
Many of, again, my guess is many of the standards that we're dealing with here for Sustainable Development Goals have to be fairly low in order to be inclusive of the developing world as well. Does that let these guys off the hook somewhat?
No, because the standards that we're setting in Canada relate to the Canadian context and the Canadian reality, and the reality of different regions and different provinces and territories. I think what's really important about the data in the Canadian context, in addition to what's already been said, is I think this federal government has invested historic amounts of money in infrastructure, in housing, in public transit. And the municipalities have to report back, so the data needs to be there to demonstrate the progress from these investments, so the investments will be ongoing and sustained in the long term, because without those investments, municipalities cannot achieve the objectives that Canadians expect them to achieve. They can't achieve what's inherent in the SDG, number 11, and the other SDGs. So that data and the ability to report and demonstrate progress towards the national objectives is part of what's really important.
I guess one of the big numbers in Drawdown is the number 100, because you've got 100 solutions out there ready to go. Right. Give us one solution in particular that you think is important for us to know this evening.
So the number 3 solution is reducing food waste. Probably not on most people's guess of what a top 5 or top 10 list to address climate change looks like. I think it's an exciting solution because it's something that anyone can impact immediately and at no cost. Food waste, about 1/3 of the food that we produce around the world is not consumed.
Amazing.
And in regions of high income like ours, that's mostly waste by choice. So we reject ugly produce, we overserve, we overbuy. We actually have a lot of agency as individuals to address that challenge. It's also pretty easy from a policy perspective. So in France, for example, grocery stores cannot throw away edible food. So it ends up in the hands of people who need it. It's an opportunity for people to save money. It's an opportunity to address issues of food insecurity, lots of wins, as well as addressing emissions.
Where's refrigeration on your list?
Refrigeration, it's not so sexy, but it is the number 1. So the Montreal Protocol, as folks will remember, led to the phase out of chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, which were the dominant chemical refrigerant that we were using in our air conditioning systems, refrigerators, et cetera. HFCs, hydrofluorocarbons, came in as the dominant replacement chemical for CFCs. Great on the one hand, because they have almost no negative impact on the ozone layer, but they turn out to have the heat trapping potential 1,000 times or more as compared to carbon dioxide. So addressing one challenge and inadvertently, dramatically adding to another. The good news is the world has actually come to an agreement back in October 2016 to amend the Montreal Protocol. So we will be phasing out the use of HFCs over the coming decades.
To be replaced with what?
To be replaced with, there are a whole variety of solutions coming into use. Actually, carbon dioxide itself turns out to be a useful refrigerant. Gas, water, there are systems that are using water, propane, some different options. But in the meantime, even as we head to phase out of HFCs, these things are everywhere, right? Every kitchen, every office space, every vehicle. So we have a huge opportunity to address leaks and especially disposal between now and the time that HFCs are history. What our work shows is that we could avoid about 90 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent in those fluorinated gases.
I don't know what a gigaton is, but it just sounds like a lot.
A gigaton is a lot. A gigaton is 1 billion tons. Okay. I usually, when I explain this to audiences, I use an image of cows because a cow weighs about a ton. So you can imagine a gigaton is about 1 billion cows worth. In this case, we're usually talking about carbon dioxide. For sort of a reference point, the world emitted about 36 gigatons of carbon dioxide in 2016. So about 36 billion cows.
So the upside of this is enormous.
Gas. The upside is enormous.
John, to you first in Washington, D.C., ending poverty in its forms everywhere is about as lofty an international development goal as it comes. Everybody's going to be asking this first question, is it really doable?
Well, I think the starting point is how has the world been doing so far? And as you said, we've seen extraordinary progress in the past generation. In 2000, roughly 1 in 4 people around the world was living in extreme poverty. Today, it's down to about 1 in 12. It's a little more than 600 million people who are, best estimate, living in extreme poverty. If business as usual continues, we'll get down to around 5% of the world, a little more than 400 million people in extreme poverty. So that's 400 million out of what's going to be a lot more than 8 billion people. It's a small share, but still a sizable number. So the question is not whether it's possible. The question is, how are we going to do it, in my view? And how are we going to think about each of those 400 million plus lives in a way that gets them the basic services they need, or in this case, the basic income they need in order to get over that final hurdle. It's probably and arguably the most exciting civilizational challenge we're coming across right now, in addition, arguably, to climate change. But it's also one that I think is for the record books if we pull it off.
I'm going to ask our director, Sheldon Osmond, to, just before we go any further, thank you. That's a wide shot. In the background here, we have a video display, and it literally shows people leaving poverty. We have, as John just suggested, a little over 600 million people in the world today who are living in extreme poverty, but through efforts around the world, we see a graphic which suggests that people are leaving poverty all the time, and we are making progress. Julia, I should ask you, is this more, though, of a stretch goal? Is it more of an aspiration to be able to do this by the deadline of the year 2030?
So I share John's excitement that this is an amazing challenge that we have before us. It is not going to be easy, and it's not meant to be. It is a very bold and ambitious goal, and it's meant to spur us into action. Again, as John mentioned, business as usual is not on. If we're serious about tackling this goal, we really need to do things very differently, both at home in Canada, where these goals also apply, and internationally. And part of the difficulty is that given the success we had with the MDGs of having poverty, now we're facing the really hard to reach, those that need to now be pulled out of poverty. That additional half is going to require much more innovation, much more resources, much more dedication, profound changes. It won't be just, you know, the low-hanging fruit. We're going for the difficult cases, those living in the most fragile contexts and conflict-affected states, sub-Saharan Africa, women and girls living in precarious situations. So these are not easy populations to access and to support. So it is going to be very, very difficult, but it's a fabulous challenge. And you know, there's a strong political will across the world to do this. And we just need to get to work.
And let me follow up with you, Julia, since you mentioned the MDGs. These are the Millennium Development Goals, which predated the Sustainable Development Goals, which is what the United Nations is on to now. They did have a goal to reduce extreme poverty by half by 2015, and somehow they managed to beat that target by 5 years. That sounds like a fantastic accomplishment. How come more people don't know that?
Yeah, well, I can take a little bit of blame on behalf of civil society on that front. It's hard to communicate the complexity of development to people in Canada and across the world. I think one of the advantages that we have right now with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, that we didn't have with the Millennium Development Goals, is that these apply everywhere, as you said at the beginning. So they apply to Canada. So now we have a global agenda to address poverty and other challenges that also has to be applied here in Canada. And we believe in civil society that this provides us a fabulous tool to talk to Canadians about these issues because they matter both at home and abroad.
People talk about the environment. There's no doubt climate change and the environment is a huge issue, hugely important. I would put housing right up there.
Right up there or ahead of it?
Maybe ahead of it.
Ahead of the environment, eh? Ahead of climate change. Make that case.
I'm not going to take on the climate change people with due respect. But I will say that if you look at people's lives, what is the most central thing in every person's life, your life, my life, every person's life, a homeless person's life, someone living in inadequate housing. Housing is central to everything. It's central to health, education, to being alive, to access to water and sanitation. I mean, housing is just central.
It's where it all starts.
I think so.
Housing is not necessarily viewed, though, by most people, I think it's fair to say, as a basic human right. How do you think it is viewed now?
Absolutely right that it's not viewed by many as a human right. What I find really interesting, Steve, is that when I talk to people, especially people struggling with housing, they kind of know it is a human right. They often will say to me, surely I'm not meant to live this life. Surely I'm entitled to a life of dignity. And dignity is the core of human rights. That's what we're on about, right? That's why housing is a human right, because it goes to the core of a life of dignity. So people know it's a human right on that kind of visceral level. I find governments, all levels of government, developers, real estate agents, investors, private equity firms, they don't know that it's a human right.
Well, that's the key, right? Because for so many people, including homeowners, right, they see it as potential. You know, if they don't have a pension, that is their pension. It is an investment for them. It is, you know, part of their capital infrastructure. They don't necessarily see it as a basic human right. I guess the follow-up is, you know, in New York, in Hong Kong, in London, in Toronto, in cities where housing is, you know, affordable housing is a huge issue, is it just that in those kind of bigger cities, or does it go beyond that?
Oh, it definitely goes beyond that. There's no doubt that in those hubs that you mentioned, housing is really, in new and unprecedented ways, looked at as a commodity. There's no doubt about that. And you're seeing like money flowing from, you know, island to island, investor money being plunked into housing as a commodity. You're seeing big private equity firms, pension funds, putting money into housing as a commodity to grow wealth. That's for sure.
But housing is a commodity that does grow wealth. It is at least that, right?
It hasn't always been regarded that way, though.
Okay.
So it's, and I'm not here to say never look at housing as a way to have some economic security. I'm not saying that. But what we've seen recently is different. The huge, unprecedented amounts of capital being sunk into housing as the safest investment. That is new. Housing has always, I think, been understood as a place of security, a place for security, but not necessarily a place to grow wealth. So if you take, let's take Canada, for example. There was huge investment in housing in the 60s and 70s. And I think governments felt like housing was really core to the security of a family or an individual. And there was a way in which we made sure that there was all sorts of different types of housing. So social housing as housing of last resort. Home ownership was made possible for a variety of people who could afford home ownership. Rental accommodation was being built so that those who didn't need social housing but couldn't afford a home could go into the rental market. That was viewed akin to housing as a human right because it was like, okay, we need to provide and ensure that people have security, and housing is key to that. I think there's been a huge shift between that vision of housing as security and now housing as the safe place to invest money by the uber wealthy and by these pension funds, et cetera. Is it a global phenomenon and not just these hub cities, as we might call them? Or absolutely.
And that is the Agenda's Week in Review for this Friday, April 27th, 2018. You can see all of those conversations in their entirety at tvo.org, on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, and on our Twitter feed. That's twitter.com/theagenda.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.